Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from fantasyfootballscout.co.uk. My name is David and today I'm joined by Mark for a roundup of the midweek matches, which we were thinking we'd probably do something on anyway. We've obviously had this planned in the diary, but all of a sudden those midweek matches, which of course were to do with the EFL Cup across Tuesday and Wednesday, seemingly have obliterated all our FPL teams because we're now flush with yellow flags. So even more so than before, this is quite an important check-in on Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, ahead of that Saturday deadline coming up, isn't it, Mark?
Yes, yeah, and I'm sure we'll come on to the flags and the injuries later on, but it's certainly added to some of the earlier in the week issues around sort of Saka and Maddison. That the last thing we needed was more, and that's seemingly what's happened. So there's never really a quiet week in FPL.
Yeah, that very much is true. As Mark said, we're going to talk about the injuries a little bit later. What we're going to do first is we are going to go through the results of the games, pick out any lineup pieces of interest, perhaps in terms of formations. Of course, there's a number of teams who'd like to rotate a lot. Man City and Brighton are among them, for example. So we'll have a look at who played minutes and in what positions, things like that. So that was our plan anyway, but we've now obviously had to create an entire big section at the end of the video all about the injuries. So if you want some updates on those injured players that you may have in your team, then do stay tuned for that. Before we get any further, Mark, how many yellow flags have you got in your team when you woke up this morning? I had 4. Maddison, Saka, Chilwell and Botman are my flags. What about you? How are you faring?
Well, 3 yellow, and I've also got Baldock, which I guess is a shade of orange. So, and he's already dropped in price as well. There's
Oof.
been so many annoying price drops. So I guess that counts as 4.
I think so, yeah. I mean, at the very least, you've got a lot of the citrus colours. That's what we don't want. Those we don't want citrus colours. We just want lovely and bright green for our players. But yeah, alas, this is the situation we find ourselves in. And yeah, we will think. Well, it also, we should just say actually, it does actually increase the importance of this week's press conferences as well. So people should definitely stay tuned for those. It's going to be a busy couple of days for the editorial team, isn't it, Mark?
Yes, it normally is anyway.
That's true.
It sort of culminates at the end of the week, but this time there will certainly be interest for sure in certain popular players of this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as Mark says there, him and the rest of the editorial team are always busy. And that's one of the many reasons why we are very, very appreciative of the fact that we have been shortlisted for the best in fantasy football in editorial at the Football Content Awards for 2023. So we're very, very appreciative of everybody who nominated us for that. Thank you very much for that. If you'd like to vote for us to win that category at this year's awards, you can find a link that will help you do that in the description. And any support that you guys throw our way, we massively, massively appreciate it. So thank you very much for that. Of course, before we get any further, we've got members stuff to talk through as well. If you haven't sorted out your membership, get that sorted for the new game week deadline, especially if you need like a ton of replacements for all your injured players. You can still save 30% on those preseason prices. And finally, this video is brought to you by smartkits.com. We've got a message from them, our sponsor. You can now back up your FPL selections by betting on this week's most notable players. With them, it now allows you to bet on whether or not you think a player will get more or less than a certain number of points. For example, this week, if you think Marcus Rashford will get more or less than 6.5 points, then you can bet on this. There are also head-to-head markets where you can bet on who you think will get the most points this week. Smartkits FPL markets are unique and allow you to win while playing FPL. And we know not everyone gambles. That's why we take it very seriously. And on our website, we have a filter where you can turn off and opt out of gambling ads. For those who do enjoy it, do so responsibly and safely. There's more info on Smartkits in the description. You, of course, have to be over 18 to play. And we encourage everybody to gamble responsibly and to be gambleaware.org. When the fun stops, stop. But as I always say, the fun in football never stops when it comes to reviewing FPL talking points, especially when it comes from these midweek games that sometimes can give us a clue about the upcoming game week. And what we're going to do is we're going to focus on that first, and then we'll come to the injuries a little bit later. And so we'll start with Tuesday night's games, and I'll just pick out the games that involve Premier League teams here. We've got Exeter beating Luton Town 1-0, so Luton are now out of the cup. Ipswich also beat Wolves 3-2, so we've had 2 Premier League teams humbled by lower league opposition. We also saw Manchester United beat Crystal Palace by 3-0. I think that's... Oh, and we saw Swansea also win 4-0 at Salford. They're the 5 games from Tuesday night. So we'll start with Luton. Anything of note here, Mark, outside of the fact that I suppose... yeah, we know now that Luton won't be involved in a blank or double game week around the time of the League Cup final because they're out.
Yeah, that's right. Well, for Luton and Burnley, ahead of their double game week 7, they both made mass changes for these Tuesday night matches. So Burnley changed all 11. So players of FPL interest like Bayer and possibly even Amdouni, they didn't start. And Luton made 10 changes. Only Alfie Doherty was the remaining one. So it certainly means that managers invested in Kabore or Calvin Morris, stuff like that. They had Carlton Morris had nothing to worry about here. Neither started, and Luton are out, and Burnley won 4-0. Many changes and not much controversy really.
So no news is good news, I think, is very much the key line there, especially with that double game week coming up, that's for sure. Did we see similar rotation with Wolves? Is that perhaps the reason why they lost? I mean, to be fair, Ipswich are very much on the up. They gave Plymouth Argyle quite the run for the League One title last season and are already on the promotion charge once again in the Championship. So they are a very informed team. Was this a case of the first 11 getting undone by a team with a lot of momentum, or did they also sort of throw this game? Well, sorry, I don't want to accuse Wolves of throwing games. I know that Sir Alex Ferguson had an issue with that a number of years ago, with Wolves specifically. But as in, have they sort of leaned towards more Premier League focus and rotated for this game as well?
There's a lot of changes here for Wolves. There was, yeah. There was no start for Jose Sa, Pedro Neto, or Cunha up front. Neither of them started. Cunha did come on from the bench, but it was still a decent enough 11. There was names like Huang, who scored, sort of Sarabia, Hugo Bueno, Totti, Gomez also scored, Matt Doherty at right back. But yeah, that was another lineup that was heavily changed, and it went they went 2-0 ahead, so it looked like it was going to work, but then a comeback win eliminated Wolves.
Ah, there we are. That certainly makes a lot of sense. They very much need to focus on their Premier League survival more than a cup run this season. That's for sure. A team that probably would quite like to focus on a cup run this year is probably Manchester United, because, with of course the best of respect to the Red Devils, the EFL Cup perhaps one of their best possible chances of winning a trophy, especially as Man City are now out of the competition. There were changes here from what I can see, but by the looks of it, less so than Crystal Palace, who rotated a little bit more. Perhaps that's the story of why United won this game 3-0.
Possibly, yeah. Both sides had sort of notable FPL names not take part. So for Manchester United, Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford were both unused substitutes. And there were sort of names like Mason Mount was back from injury in the lineup. Onana started in goal. Sort of Varane, Dalot, they all began. And the halftime removal of Mason Mount, it sounded prearranged, going from Ten Hag's post-match quotes, so there shouldn't be any concern there. So yeah, owners of Rashford and Fernandes have nothing to worry about. They should be fully rested for the weekend. As for Palace, well, first of all, Odsonne Edouard, I quite liked him as a cheap forward option, but he picked up a hamstring injury at the weekend, and it was enough to keep him out of this match. And they also benched Eze and Marc Guehi. They both came on, but Anderson, the other centre back, didn't come on. So even there was a few changes going on there, and it was a fairly solid 3-0 win for Man United in the end.
From what I've seen, it sounds as if Mason Mount was very much instrumental in that first half, played very well, had some good numbers. And so while there's probably not all that much interest in him specifically as an asset, of course continues to be interest in Rashford and Fernandes. People had felt like United were lacking a little bit of a spark, a little bit of a control in midfield, I suppose. Mount coming back probably just about boosts Rashford and Fernandes' ongoing output, would you say?
It could be seen in both ways, really. But yeah, certainly at the start, when Mount was in the lineup, Fernandes wasn't yet delivering, but the underlying numbers were good. But then on the other hand, if Mount plays well, the team plays well, and if the team plays well, they're more likely to score goals. It could be seen either way.
Yeah. Sofiane Amrabat also involved as well. He played at left back, which is really interesting. I mean, primarily he is a midfielder, but again, him also being able to get involved as well is also a good thing for United, probably moving forward as well.
Yeah, if they can build on that 1-0 win at Burnley, which where the result was what mattered really. That win, this win, getting players into the lineup like Amrabat and Mount back, you would think that they might be turning a corner perhaps at a good time, but we've probably said that before and it hasn't quite happened. So.
Yeah, very true. What I love most about this actually is one of those, I swear this always happens. It's like the football gods have a little bit of a, they just like this and they kind of want to see it as often as they can, where you have a cup game between two sides 3 to 4 days before the two teams meet in the Premier League, or vice versa. They meet in the Premier League and 3 to 4 days later, there they are meeting in the Cup. And it's the same thing. So this is, in many respects, a dry run for this weekend's game between the two sides in the Premier League. But of course, there was quite a lot of rotation. So arguably, it is a totally different fixture. But yeah, I just thought I'd point that out. They've had a chance to have a look at each other in some respects. And as you say, good news for United to at least have those guys back. That is for sure. I think that's everything that's non-injury related from Tuesday night's games. It was sort of more to do with performance and lineups and formations and things like that. So let's move on to Wednesdays, because I know that certainly of the games we just talked about there were a couple of injuries that are of note. But yeah, Wednesday night, a little bit busier for the Premier League teams. We saw Aston Villa lose 2-1 at home to Everton, who have now got 2 wins on the bounce in all competitions all of a sudden. We saw Bournemouth beat Stoke 2-0 at home. Brentford lost 1-0 at home to Arsenal. Chelsea finally got themselves a goal in the month of September and beat Brighton 1-0. Fulham beat Norwich 2-1. West Ham won 1-0 at Lincoln City. Liverpool beat former Premier League side Leicester 3-1. And that aforementioned game between Newcastle and Man City went the way that Marc here was hoping for. So, I mean, that's probably the biggest game, the one of most interest from Wednesday night in terms of, accurately predicting Man City lineup. So how much involvement did we see for the key assets in that one? And, well, there were some injuries here, which we will come on to talk about in a minute. But, yeah, what was the story of this game outside of the injuries?
In many respects, it was sort of almost like a reserves match between the two sides, because Newcastle, for example, changed all of the back four. So owners of sort of Trippier, Botman, Schär, Burn, didn't think there'd be anything to worry about, because they completely changed the back line and they managed to keep a clean sheet against Man City. Tino Livramento was particularly brilliant, and that was sort of his first start for the club, and he just looks like a brilliant purchase. To have 2 right backs of that quality is sort of a surreal feeling at Newcastle after many years of Paul Dummett at centre back, of course. And yeah, further upfield, it was just a matter of sort of starting Isak over Wilson. That's always sort of interesting to see whose turn it is next, trying to get clues for the weekend. Because Harvey Barnes, we already know, is going to be out for a while with an injury. It was sort of a relief to see Joe Linton come back from injury, so it's sort of 1 in, 1 out. And as for Man City, the main thing is that Julian Alvarez started and played, I think it was 74 minutes.
That's right,
so that could be seen in a couple of ways. Firstly, if he's played 74 minutes, is it his turn to sit out at the weekend? But also, when they were chasing an equaliser, they took him off. Pep took him off. So you could see that as well. He's prioritising Wolves, a game where Alvarez is planning to start. So it could be seen in either way. Haaland was unused. And then there were names like Edison, Kyle Walker, Ruben Diaz, Doku, and Foden all on the bench.
Yeah, and it was Foden that came on for Alvarez, actually, in what continues to be a bit of an annoying little FPL thing, in that a lot of people had Foden, got rid of him, got Alvarez, and then in the most recent Premier League game, that was when Foden finally got himself a goal, and Alvarez didn't. So, yeah, a little bit of more, the FPL gods is having a bit of a laugh at us this morning that Alvarez was, in fact, replaced by Foden. The other way you could look at it, without, we always try and second guess Pep, right? But he's chasing the game and he takes Alvarez off and brings on Foden. Ugh. So could you turn around and invent a narrative of, oh, he prefers Foden again? Because one thing that we know about Pep is he is changeable, and I don't mean that to suggest that he's not sure of himself, because he of course is a multi-time like Premier League winner and of course a Champions League winning manager with Man City as well now. I guess it's just there's some information there, but we are still at Pep's mercy, right?
Yeah, Pep just seems to like dip in and out of his opinions on players. He'll really like a player for a period of time, and then it'd be sort of a different shiny toy. And I'm sure there's more logic to it than just that. But now that Jack Grealish is back, you're right that Foden for Alvarez change could be seen in a couple of ways. And yeah, could it mean he's been rested for Wolves, or does it mean that he's maybe lost a little bit of not faith, but it's somebody else's turn? And Grealish got all 90 minutes of that match, so he's back now. Foden's come on and he scored the winner. Haaland is Haaland. Pep Roulette is a horrible game to guess. And you said the other week that Alvarez was almost undroppable. If he could sort of give a similar out of character clue like that, it would be really nice.
The problem is whenever he says that about players, a couple of weeks later he's on the bench. Or in some cases, 3 months later, he's all of a sudden on loan at Bayern Munich. So, who knows? Who knows, to be honest. So, yeah, there's a little bit more. We can be a little bit more short, I think, about players such as Walker and Diaz. I think them not playing is helpful. Akanji, Gvardiol, and Ake were the back three for the game. Ake got 68 minutes, replaced by Nunez, and then Gvardiol and Akanji played the whole game. So whilst that's probably a bit annoying for Gvardiol and Akanji owners, at the very least, if you've got Diaz or Walker, you probably expect them to come back in for the Wolves game, because they have had their full rest in this one. Neither of them played, as you mentioned earlier. So slightly more we can glean about defence probably than attack going into Gameweek 7.
The other thing of note is that sort of saying on Twitter that because Man City are now out of this and Brentford are also out from before, it could potentially open up a gap for their postponed game. Do you know how in game week 18 we already know that match is off because of the Club World Cup? It seems like there's a nice little place for that to go in game week 20. There could be a double game week 20. Not that it's confirmed yet, but for those who like to think in advance about a chip strategy, that would give Haaland a double game week at home to Sheffield United and Brentford. So if be interesting to see how that develops. Certainly, maybe keep your triple captain chip in the pockets, just in case something like that does emerge.
And possibly also the wild card as well, because game week 20, if it were to land in that slot, as I said, this is all hypothetical, but it's nice to discuss potential ideas here. Game week 20 is the last time you can use that final wild card, because the deadline is the 30th of December, 1:30 p.m. as things currently stand, but that may shift with the movement for games for television. But either way, that's the final one you can use it. And there had already been some people looking at perhaps dead-ending their team into one of those game weeks, getting rid of those Man City players, knowing that you can immediately wildcard, well, not immediately, a couple of game weeks later, wildcard them back in for game week 20. If that ends up being a double as well, that strategy becomes even more attractive, to be honest. So, yeah, it's definitely worth keeping an eye on what happens there. As you say, Brentford also out of the competition as well. So let's move to London then, where Brentford, of course, hosted Arsenal on Wednesday night. A 1-0 win for Arsenal. What was the story of this game? How much were these two teams going for it? How much did we see rotation? I'm a little bit nervous about the Fleck Republic, which of course we got the man who came up with that term with us right now. Even though people keep associating it with me because I've got Flecken, I owe that moniker to the man I'm in the virtual studio with today. So I have a lot of interest in the Brentford defence. So yeah, some thoughts on this game. How did it go?
That's the thing. You're the one with Flecken, and I've never had him, so it doesn't feel right, does it? It was a strong Brentford 11 actually. They did go for it. Sort of in Mbeumo and Wissa, got all 90 minutes. Flecken as well. It was a strong lineup all throughout. The only notable absentee, apart from sort of the injuries we already know about, Rico Henry and stuff like that, Ben Mee might be out for a couple of weeks or so with a muscle injury. But apart from that, just looking at the lineup here, it was a strong one. They went for it, but still couldn't get past Arsenal, the Reece Nelson goal. Arsenal were a little bit more rotated, so they opted for Ramsdale in goal over David Raya, which could sort of add further to the thought that it might be his now. It might be his shirt now, David Raya. Saka wasn't in the squad because he has already been told by Arteta that it's a possibility that he won't be there for Bournemouth. But in terms of sort of non-injuries in the lineup, there was a slight Odegaard cameo at the end. Jesus came on as well, but there was no Trossard or Martinelli or Declan Rice at all. They'll also be assessed. So the Arsenal squad was more rotated than Brentford, but there were still a couple of sort of notable names throughout the squad. So Gabriel, Ben White, Havertz all started.
I do think the most concerning thing here for those who are wavering on Brentford is the fact that they went very full strength here at home against an Arsenal team that, contained some players that some managers may not have even heard of. Arsenal fans, I'm sure, have heard of, Sago, I think that's how you say it, or Sago. But the fact that they couldn't actually get past that team is mildly concerning, I guess. The back four was Kivior, Gabriel, Tomiyasu, White, and then Ramsdale and it's not, they're no slouches, that's for sure. But to not score at home, get dumped out of the cup with a relatively strong 11, I don't know, that might just add to people's concerns about Brentford. They very quickly have gone from a team that's super in form, because Mbeumo had been kind of lighting the league up, and all of a sudden now they're a team that haven't won at home this season. They've won one of their first 6 games, I think it is, 6 points from 6 matches, and they're in the bottom half of the table. And very, very quickly they've become an underperforming team. And I guess this result may well add to people's view on that.
Yeah, that's right. And they do have a decent looking game coming up against Nottingham Forest, but it's maybe that's not, maybe instinctively we think that, but Forest aren't a bad side, to be fair. So if Mbeumo blanks again, that could put him on people's chopping blocks, because it's a time where fixtures are changing. There are fixture swings coming up, and I think if Mbeumo and Vissa sort of blank again, that could lead to a lot of transfers out.
Yeah, certainly a lot of interest, for example, in West Ham midfielders, who would be a fairly simple straight swap for Mbeumo in some scenarios, depending on cash in the bank, for example. So yeah, you're right. It could be it could all contribute towards that big swing of transfers.
Yeah, Moussa Diaby, I think Villa from Gameweek 9 have a nice run as well, so it could sort of naturally lead to that sort of switch.
Well, let's move to Diaby's club then. Let's talk about Aston Villa and Everton now. I kind of imagine that probably people aren't interested in Everton players yet. They might be at some point. Decore in particular was very good at the weekend. Aston Villa have been very informed this season. They didn't really need a result out of this one, and I think that's largely reflected in their starting 11. But there were a couple of key names. I could see Cash and Diaby in the starting 11, but from what I can see from the BBC, it looks like John McGinn played left back. So, does that... Firstly, is that true? Secondly, have Villa sort of, rolled out a couple of changes here with the view of we're going to focus on the league in Europe?
Possibly, yeah. It's already, they've already been stretched a little bit further with Europe, so a cup run would maybe take that a bit further. Yeah, McGinn did start at left back, but then there was a 31st minute substitution because of an injury, but then there were 3 half-time swaps where Lucas Digne did come on, and Ollie Watkins came on as well. So I think Emery sort of went for it a bit more in the second half with his lineup, but it still wasn't quite enough to overcome Everton. You're right. Everton are they've got 2 really good home games coming up right now, but the problem is, like, even Calvert-Lewin, so he scored at the weekend, he started here, scored here, but do we know yet that he's sort of match fit enough to be starting consecutive matches, and he could be a decent punt up front, but there's just that little bit of uncertainty over his game time really. And then elsewhere, yeah, the Jordan Pickford owners have not enjoyed their season so far, so I'm not going to start promoting him.
That's probably fair. On Calvert-Lewin, actually, they are still managing his minutes, aren't they? Because just seen he played 72 minutes in this, having his minutes managed there. But yeah, the Everton lineup is very strong for them. That is, that is fairly close to their first team. Jack Harrison getting involved now as well. I mean, I actually think he's a fantastic signing. I was quite surprised Everton were able to secure him, to be honest. I think I would have assumed that, no disrespect to the Toffees, bigger clubs, or perhaps clubs in a better moment, as football managers often describe form, I thought maybe one of them might be able to pick him up because he is very good. So him being able to come into this game, play 65 minutes as well, I think that probably bodes well moving forward. So owned him a couple of times when he was at Leeds in recent years. I certainly quite like what he can bring to the table. So the fact that he's starting to get some minutes now is definitely something of note. No involvement in either of the goals in a direct sense, but yeah, I think him playing in that team is definitely going to benefit them moving forward. Let's move to Bournemouth now. 2-0 win over Stoke. The biggest news here is probably the injury, which we will come to. We do promise. But was there anything else of note here? I guess more interest in who their next opponents are rather than necessarily Bournemouth themselves.
Yes, yeah. As I say, there's only one Premier League side in this match, and Bournemouth don't have a lot of FPL investment normally anyway. So there wasn't a lot of note really, apart from that one of the new signings, Tyler Adams, was in the squad for the first time. He came on off the bench actually as well, so he could be coming in the proceedings. And they do have pretty okay fixtures coming up, I think, if that's what you were referring to.
Well, after the Arsenal game. Yeah, sorry, I should have been more clear. I think people are probably interested in the state of Bournemouth, perhaps for their Arsenal players. And then maybe after that, they can maybe offer some differential potential. But yeah.
Yeah, because that's it. Yeah, for those with Arsenal assets, defenders in particular, they sort of might be feeling a bit more confident for this now. But Bournemouth did win 2-0. Solanke scored one of them. So they needed that confidence boosting win because it hasn't been a great start for them so far, but certainly opponents will be targeting them over upcoming weeks.
That's for sure. Well, speaking of another team that desperately needed a win, Chelsea finally got a result that they can be happy with, which was against Brighton as well. So that's a team that are no slouches. What did we see here? Did we see a lot of rotation? I mean, these are two teams that have been guilty of rotation in the last couple of weeks. An opportunity to look at them ahead of Gameweek 7 is probably useful. What did we see in the way of lineups and approaches here?
Yeah, so Chelsea and Brighton, they're sort of names, just you can't say one without the other these days, can you? The amount of involvement they have in each other's lives. And Chelsea, where to begin with Ben Chilwell? He did start here, in fairness, and I guess we'll come back to him later. It was a pretty changed 11. There was only cameos for Sterling and Enzo Fernandez, so that they did come on later on to see out the win. But there were sort of new names in the lineup, like Cucurella was given a start. Ian Maatsen, Cole Palmer, they all got the nod here. Disasi and Levi Colwill both got the whole 90 here. So Colwill owners in particular, there could be a slight chance, could be a slight concern, but probably not considering Gusto is suspended now. So they'll probably just line up differently there. Sanchez got the nod in goal. As for Brighton, it was another start for Estepinian, and he got all 90 minutes as well. So he played for Brighton last Thursday in the Europa League, Sunday in the Premiership, got all 90 minutes here at Chelsea. For a rotating manager like De Zerbi, that could be a concern because his mass rotation is totally working. Not last night, but in terms of the league and stuff, it just, you can't even tell sometimes. What even is their second 11? Who knows anymore? But there were starts for João Pedro, Mitoma started again, Dunk on the bench, no Evan Ferguson at all. and Pascal Gross is expected to be out until the international break. So there are a few changes there. For those keeping tabs of Brighton's goalkeeper rotation, it was Bart Verbruggen who started this match. So does that mean Steele gets the nod at the weekend? Who knows?
Yeah. Who knows? Yeah, it's kind of the same as Pep, to be honest, but arguably worse because, yeah, De Zerbi has been very keen on his rotation this year. I think the most frustrating thing for me out of this game, Nicholas Jackson. Oh, right. Know to score now, don't you, mate? He's fine. Finally got himself a goal when a lot of us have been waiting a very long time. This always happens, though. This always happens. You get an underperforming FPL asset that like everybody owns, and then they go and get the goal in the competition that technically, to you, as an FPL manager who doesn't support Chelsea, means nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Nicholas Jackson. First of all, I keep saying his name, and I think of that Outcast song. Sorry, Miss Jackson.
Oh, right, yeah.
And he is making a lot of daughters cry and people cry in general because he is so frustrating. Of course, he was going to score last night. Of course, he was. He's 5 of his 6 games have ended with 1 point. He's got himself suspended, and he scores last night and had 1 ruled out as well. So it could have been a brace. What a troll.
He joins a very long list of Chelsea strikers who that effectively is simply their role in our lives, sadly. So yeah, 'twas ever thus with Chelsea strikers, unfortunately. Let's move on to the final 3 games. It's just we'll try and sort of rattle through these nice and quick so we can get onto those all important injuries because that of course does involve Chelsea and Brighton as well. Fulham, West Ham, and Liverpool. Fulham beat Norwich 2-1. West Ham won 1-0 away at Lincoln, and Liverpool saw off former Premier League opposition in Leicester 3-1 at Anfield. Anything in particular from these games that's of note, or was there mass rotation across all 3?
For Fulham, Raul Jimenez missed out completely. There was no start for Andreas Pereira either. They got that 2-1 win. West Ham made 10 changes from the weekend. So there's sort of no Areola or Bowen or anything like that. I think it was only Souček who kept his place. So that was almost irrelevant from an FPL perspective. They all mostly kept their place. As for Liverpool, there was no Salah, Alisson, Robertson in the squad. On came Darwin Nunez and Szoboszlai, his goal was very nice to watch. It just had a nice feel. I think it made a nice noise as it went in as well. It was when the goal makes a noise, it should be like an extra bonus for that.
The whip of the net and the rattle of the bottom bar that weights down the net. That's the noise, isn't it? That's the one. And there's a little crack as well as it goes in. Oh, what a sound.
Yeah, and if it's close enough to the TV mics as well, it's just a perfect combination, really. So yes, that was great from Szoboszlai. Mo Salah is rested and fine for the weekend, and the continuing debate about Darwin Nunez, like he could be a brilliant option, but you just don't know when he's going to start because Gakpo scored tonight, Jota scored last night, Jota scored as well. They've still got sort of 4 names to fit into 2 slots alongside Salah, and that damages Darwin's appeal, unfortunately.
He continues to be something of a chaos machine. But nothing has unleashed chaos on FPL managers this week like injuries have, and we've been sort of putting it off. Apologies for that. We wanted to just cover some of the other bits of pieces before we get to the real nitty-gritty stuff of the injuries that have arisen from the midweek games. I can't remember a set of midweek games like this. I mean, we've even got, with one team, 6 injury updates from one club. It's absolutely nuts. So we'll start off with the sort of the laundry list outside of the big ones, and then we'll get to the big ones in a sec. So first off, United, Ericsson and McTominay missed the game, both of them because of illness, which probably just opens up a world for Mason Mount to start. You would imagine Gameweek7 in central midfield, which is quite useful. Crystal Palace, Riel de Wald, he had to come off in this game, and Roy Hodgson said that he wasn't sure whether he was affected by cramp or a muscle issue, so that's something just to keep an eye on if you're interested in the Palace midfield. But Dean Henderson, taken off with a muscle injury in this game. Assessment will follow. So continued useful information. Not that we wish injuries on anyone, but this one actually is useful if you've got Johnston, right?
Yes, it's sort of a little bit of relief from an FPL perspective, not real life injury perspective. And for those who are looking to wildcard, it sort of does open up that sort of option of having a Johnston and Areola rotation, because there was just too much uncertainty when both were fit. But if it depending on how bad the injury is, if that secures Johnston for a while, that's a good 4.5 option.
And with it being a muscle-related injury, they'll probably take a lot more precautions around it unless it was like a knock or an impact, for example. So it could potentially lead to a few weeks of Johnston, that's for sure. Elsewhere, we got Bailey and Ramsey added to the injury and bans list on the Fantasy Football Scout website. With Bailey, muscle injury, he had to limp off with what looked like a muscle injury, and with Ramsey, he actually missed the game against Everton with a small injury. Probably not massive from an FPL perspective. As long as we can keep DRB involved, I think FPL managers are going to be happy. There's a loss of one guy who can play on the wing, which maybe helps Cash get back there potentially in Gameweek 7, for example. So again, that's more what those injuries are, more what they potentially unlock for others elsewhere. And then the same really with Solanke. So Solanke, swollen ankle in this game, came off against Stoke. Manager says it will be difficult for him to be involved against Arsenal. There's not that many people interested in Solanke, although we did already mention that the fixtures are going to turn for him at some point. And I'd sort of forgotten. I double-checked earlier on. He's actually scored 3 goals so far this season. So maybe at some point we're interested. But again, this one is quite key for that Arsenal clean sheet. If you've still got an Arsenal defender or goalkeeper, then Bournemouth probably losing Solanke for this one is quite huge. So it does sort of put some faith back into the Arsenal clean sheet credentials for Game Week 7.
Yeah, I was just starting to, over the week, warm to the idea of Solanke. Was just about to write a bit about him on a piece on Jackson alternatives, because he's, as you say, he's on 3 goals. He is the forward with most inbox touches so far as well. And from game week 8, the fixtures do get quite nice. Immediately, Everton, Wolves, Burnley. So I was definitely thinking that as a good differential option. But then the quote afterwards sounds like he is hurt a bit, so it sort of nips that in the bud.
Yeah, or to be fair, if we can get him back for game week 8, then maybe things are okay. So yeah, it's one just to keep an eye on. Don't forget about Solanke. Basically, he's been overlooked quite a lot. But yeah, I think he's 6th highest points amongst all forwards. He's got 29 so far. Only he, Watkins, Edouard, Alvarez, and Haaland are the ones ahead of him. And Bournemouth's fixtures haven't been nice. So yeah, when they do turn, if he's fit, could be worth looking at. But for now, hopefully it just boosts the Arsenal clean sheet potential for those who are still invested in the Gunners backline. Let's move on to the big ones now, because have we got some big ones now. So let's talk about Chelsea first. A lot of people don't have Chilwell anymore, but some people, myself included, held on to him in the hope of potential involvement in these Fulham and Burnley games. Probably unlikely that he's going to be involved now. We've got a tweet here which has been out on the Scout social feeds this morning. Liam Toomey, I think that's how you say it. Pochettino said Chilwell picked up a hamstring injury and needs to be assessed. He also said Madueke wasn't injured tonight, he just wasn't selected. And we actually are very lucky enough to actually have had our own man in the stands, in actual fact, at the Chelsea game. One of our members of staff is a Chelsea fan and was there. And the first-hand info that we got was he went for a sprint, fell over in a shoulder-to-shoulder, immediately signalled to the bench that he needed to be subbed off and walked off unaided. Injury was obviously bad enough that he couldn't play on because they didn't have any subs left. So Chelsea actually did finish this game with only 10 men on the pitch. It was in the 97th minute, so it sounds like they were able to get through that. But yeah, Pochettino now saying hamstring injuries, and if a hamstring injury needs assessment, that's probably not looking good for game week 7, is it? So those who have held on in the hope that he comes back into the team for the Fulham game, not looking good, right?
He's one of several Chelsea players that it's been a roller coaster ride with already. And it just as talk was gathering that, hey, if you haven't sold him yet, you may as well keep him for Fulham. Gusto's suspended, so he's probably at left back, but then he hurts his hamstring here. So it's just, we don't know. And we just got to latch on to whatever Pochettino says pre-match, really.
We are very much at his mercy, as we are with many other actual real Premier League managers. We're at their mercy as fantasy managers. Now, another manager who we're all going to be hanging on his every word for Game Week 7 is your boy, Eddie Howe, because he unleashed a absolute laundry list of injuries for Newcastle. It was like, that sort of that meme of like, and there's an injury for you, and an injury for you, and an injury for you. It's
Ultra
just like,
one.
and another thing, and another. Oh, and by the way, this guy's injured too. I think it was 6 in total. So yeah, Wilson and Botman, I think, are the sort of the ones we've got a quote on the screen. So Callum's got a bit of hamstring tightness. That's why he wasn't involved at all tonight, says Eddie Howe. We'll see how he is for the weekend. Sven's got a bit of a knee problem. Again, we'll see how he is for the weekend. So they're the top 2, but there's 4 others, Marc. I mean, just, wow, what a week. Yeah, take us through.
That meme does seem quite fitting for it. It's just, I don't know about you, but I had the feeling the more names that Eddie Howe said, the least truthful it was. Like, if he's just saying names for the sake of it, does he just not like saying rotation? Because it's fine to say that. If you wanted to just rotate your side in a cup game, you are allowed to say that. You don't have to make up injuries for your players. But I think he kind of has done this before. I think when he's fired off a few training ground knocks and then they were fine by the weekend. So as a Botman owner, really, really hope that's the case again. So if you mentioned both strikers, didn't he? Isak and Wilson. I think one of them would just about make it for the weekend, you would imagine. Yeah, it's hard to say because Harvey Barnes did get a real injury at the weekend, which is going to keep him out for months, apparently. So you'd like to think that just made Howe extra precautious about it, and that these injuries really are just knocks and they could be back for Burnley. But at the same time, after Burnley, it's Paris Saint-Germain in the Champions League. So could he sort of, if there was any 50-50 doubt towards the likes of Botman or Wilson or Isak, then could the squad depth ensure that he could get away with not playing them against Burnley? There's a bit of nervousness, definitely, for sure. Let's hope that by Friday there's some miraculous recoveries.
Yeah, we really need that next press conference from Eddie Howe to be really useful. Yeah, the full list is, as you said, Botman, knee issue is what we're being told. Bruno Guimaraes suffered a twisted ankle against Man City, apparently, but carried on playing. So that's what we've been told in the media. Dan Burn missed this game due to illness, as did Dubravka. It's possible there's a couple of bugs going around because there's a couple of teams where a player missed because of an illness. Probably the same one, they perhaps infected each other. So those two sound less serious. I had been thinking of maybe replacing Chilwell with Dan Burn this week, and I may now have to if I want to remain invested in the Newcastle defence, because between those two, Burn probably more likely to come back in if he's only been ill compared to Botman, might have some ankle complications. And then, Isak substituted in the EFL Cup game against Man City because of calf tightness. And, we've already covered Callum Wilson as well. Hamstring tightness for him, missing that game. So, we really do need to keep an eye on those next press conferences. So if you're not already aware, of course, every Friday at 3 o'clock, we have our editor, Neil, who, of course, is one of the many people that sits in on these press conferences, getting all of that information, joined by Joe, who will go through all of the team news as we know it on Friday. So this week, more than ever, I mean, I'm hoping that's going to be our most watched video of the week, because it's going to have to be. We're all sat here wondering what to do. And at the beginning of the week, I was hoping to roll my transfer. I've now got 4 flags. I mean, if it gets any worse, I've got a Stupinian as well, who played the whole game. So, he's kind of like a rotation threat. I might be forced into a wild card that I really don't want to play, because I've been very vocal about the fact I really want to hold it. So there's going to be a lot of interest in that team news video, isn't there, Marc?
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking the same earlier. A Gameweek 7 wild card wouldn't be ideal because the fixture swings just aren't quite right. Like if you could put it off a week or 2 weeks, yes, but it just doesn't quite fall for 7. So would hate to be forced into it, but you just don't know. There's so many questions. And that would be a video that's essential viewing, really, because there are so many questions.
Yeah,
so many questions.
An absolute minefield. We all now live in a yellow flag submarine, unfortunately. So, fingers crossed.
There was also Nicholas Jackson as well. Did you see?
Of course. Yeah, sorry.
Not that he's a problem. He's suspended anyway for the weekend. But even here, this guy, he was spotted wearing a wrist strapping after the game. So he's suspended. He finally scored, and now he's wearing a wrist strapping. He just can't keep away from the drama, can he?
He really doesn't want to play the next game. he wants to shy away from the limelight, perhaps. Which, to be fair, actually probably can't blame him because the spotlight has been very much on him and there has been a lot of pressure. So yeah, he very much is just all part of the FPL drama this season. I should probably just try and finish on a positive note because actually you reminded me that we did have a few additional bits and bobs sort of pop out of the Twitter sphere this morning, and the other one is more positive. According to Time Sport, Spurs are optimistic about Maddison's knee injury not being serious and optimistic about him being able to face Liverpool on Saturday. He has trained on the grass and he has had some tests earlier this week. So fingers crossed we get a more positive update on him later on because we're going to need at least one of these yellow flags to disappear before the weekend. It looks like maybe Maddison, fingers crossed, could be one who's going to come through. So, but do of course keep an eye on Pochettino. That's come from Time Sport. So, you know, I'd rather hear it from the manager, from the horse's mouth. But yeah, so that's probably a good one, right? There's one piece of hope in this video of depression around injuries.
Yeah, we already had Saka and Maddison going into these midweek games. So if we can get positive news on both of them, Saka, I don't know, is maybe a bit more nervousness about him.
Yeah, not being
Maddison, and he's owned by a lot of people, so that's going to drastically change transfer plans if we hear something. Because they have after this game, Arsenal have Man City as well, so it could be seen as a good time to take him out if there ever is one.
Yeah, if there ever was going to be a time to sell him. I was looking at him as a season keeper, but maybe not the way things are going. But yeah, as I said, keep an eye on that team news video. It's going to be very, very important for your transfer policy for this particular game week. If you've liked this video, don't forget to hit the like button and hit the subscribe and hit that bell notification as well, because we will also tonight, Thursday night, we will have another episode of Deadline Dilemmas with Rich and Praz. Me and Mark today, we've kind of largely just focused on information exchange and sort of tried to pass on as much as we know about the current situation, both in terms of rotations, injuries, etc. If you've got some additional questions about strategies for your team, perhaps some flow charts in your head, like if this guy's fit and that guy's injured, I'll go for him, all that sort of stuff. Rich and Praz will be able to give that to you later on tonight at 9 o'clock. They're always very, very useful anyway. Two high-performing managers there, of course, but Praz especially is very, very good for his flow charts that help with those transfers as we move into Saturday and potential for bits and bobs about team news to come through. So if that's the sort of thing you want to take this information you've learned today, turn it into some strategy. Make sure you don't miss Deadline Dilemmas tonight, because it's probably, again, the most important episode of that this season with all those injuries. So make sure you check that out. Yeah, we'll have all the rest of the content, as per usual, Q&A, Deadline stream coming up as well. But with that, I shall leave you fine folks to the rest of your fretting over your yellow flags, and we shall see you next time.
Bye.